All right, let's jump into today's deep dive. And this one goes straight into true crime territory.
Ooh.
You mentioned that you're interested in cases with intriguing nicknames, and this one definitely fits the bill.
Okay, I'm intrigued already.
We are talking about the Borgia of America, Martha Wise.
Now, that's a nickname that promises a dark story for sure.
It certainly does.
Mm.
Martha Wise was an Ohio farm wife who became a pretty notorious serial killer in the 1920s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we got excerpts from her Wikipedia article, and we're going to kind of try to unpack this chilling tale.
Okay.
And try to understand, how a seemingly ordinary woman ends up on such a dark path.
That's a question that always gets me. Like, in these cases, what are the hidden forces that drive someone to these extremes?
Yeah, exactly. So let's start with Martha's early life.
Okay.
Born Martha Basil in 1883 in Hardscrabble, Ohio.
Even the name of the town sounds ominous.
Right.
Hardscrabble.
Yeah, and she was raised on a farm by her parents, and life was tough back then, especially for farm families.
Absolutely. A life of constant labor, from sunrise to sunset, often.
Yeah.
And for women, it was especially hard.
Right. And even while pregnant, Martha had to do her share of the work.
Yeah.
But here's where things start to get a little eerie.
Okay.
Even as a young girl, Martha was drawn to funerals.
Oh.
She attended every one she could.
Really?
Yeah.
So that's a fascinating detail. Do you think it was just morbid curiosity, or was there something a little deeper there psychologically?
Yeah, it's unsettling, isn't it?
It's like foreshadowing almost.
Yeah, almost like a foreshadowing of what's to come.
Right.
So let's jump ahead to 1924. Martha's husband, Albert, passes away, leaving her a widow with 4 children.
Oh, okay.
So this is the huge turning point in her life.
Of course, the death of a spouse is always a traumatic event.
Right, and in Martha's case, it seems to have triggered a series of events that would lead her down a very dark path.
Okay.
So she begins a relationship with a farmhand named Walter Johns.
Okay.
But her family, especially her mother and aunt, really strongly disapprove.
Well, that's not unusual. I mean, families can be very protective, especially when they feel like someone's taking advantage of a vulnerable widow.
Right, and this disapproval has serious consequences.
Oh.
So Martha eventually breaks things off with Johns, but it's not long after that a series of unsettling incidents begin to plague her family.
Okay.
Starting on Thanksgiving 1924,
Oh, no.
a string of arsenic poisonings affects 17 family members.
17 people. That's not just a coincidence. That's a pattern.
Right.
Someone was deliberately targeting these people.
And the details are chilling. 3 people die from these poisonings.
Oh, my God.
And some of the surviving children were left partially paralyzed from the arsenic.
Wow. So you can imagine the fear and the suspicion that must have gripped this family. I mean,
Right.
it's just a horrifying scenario to think about.
It is. So thankfully, Sheriff Fred Rochon of Medina County enters the picture.
Okay, good.
He starts investigating these suspicious deaths and uncovers a crucial piece of evidence.
What's that?
Martha had been regularly purchasing arsenic from a local drugstore.
That's damning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the sheriff orders an autopsy on Martha's aunt Lily Ginke, and it confirms arsenic poisoning.
Wow.
And so, confronted with this evidence, Martha breaks down and confesses to putting arsenic in the family's water and coffee.
That's a chilling confession, so different from the image of this simple farm wife.
Right.
And her motivation is even more unsettling, right?
Yeah, she claims she did it because she just craved attending funerals, and she just wasn't satisfied with how often they were happening naturally.
That's a bizarre and deeply disturbing justification. I mean,
Yep.
It really makes you wonder, was that truly her primary motivation, or was there something else going on? Was she trying to deflect suspicion, or was there a genuine compulsion there?
That's a great question, and that's a question the courts are going to have to grapple with.
Yeah.
And her confession is just the beginning of a legal battle that will expose the dark secrets lurking beneath the surface of this seemingly ordinary farm wife's life.
I can't wait to hear what happens next. So we have a confession, but now the focus shifts to the courtroom. How does Martha's defense team try to explain these horrific acts? Right. And is the prosecution going to be able to secure conviction?
Stay tuned.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this chilling confession, but as you know, the legal system, it's rarely straightforward.
Right.
Martha's trial began on May 4th, 1925, and her defense team, they had their work cut out for them.
Yeah, sounds like it.
You mentioned a two-pronged approach in your notes.
Yes, a two-pronged approach, right?
And it's fascinating how they tried to reconcile these two seemingly contradictory arguments.
Okay.
First, they claimed that Martha was insane, incapable of understanding the consequences of her actions.
Okay.
But then they also argued that her former lover, Walter Johns, had somehow orchestrated the poisonings.
That seems like a bit of a stretch, like they were just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what would stick.
Yeah, did the insanity plea hold any water?
Yeah, I'm curious.
Well, the sources we have don't really go into great detail about the psychological evaluations.
No.
But there's a pretty significant piece of evidence that really weakens this defense.
What was it?
Martha had meticulously documented each poisoning in a notebook, detailing who got sick when and how much arsenic she used.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's not good for the insanity defense.
Right. This level of planning and documentation suggests premeditation,
Mhm.
which doesn't really align with a claim of insanity.
No, not at all. It's just a level of awareness and control that would be difficult to reconcile with a genuine mental breakdown.
And then things took an even darker turn for the defense.
Oh no, what happened?
One of Martha's sisters-in-law, who was a key witness for the prosecution, committed suicide just days before she was set to testify.
Oh my gosh.
And then her husband, who was also scheduled to testify, had a mental breakdown after his wife's death.
Wow, talk about a dramatic turn of events. Those are some devastating blows to the defense's case.
Yeah, and it makes you think about the pressure and the scrutiny surrounding this trial.
Yeah, for sure.
And it didn't end there. Another witness under cross-examination admitted that the defense had coached him to lie to support their insanity claim.
Oh, that's a fatal mistake in any trial. It completely undermines the defense's credibility.
Right.
It makes the jury question everything they've presented.
And to make matters worse, Martha decided to testify in her own defense, which legal experts will tell you is rarely a good idea for the accused.
Yeah, not a good idea.
It just seems like everything that could go wrong for the defense did go wrong.
Yeah.
So what about the claim that Walter Johns, her former lover, was the mastermind behind the poisonings?
Yeah. Did that hold any weight?
It seems not. The prosecution effectively discredited this theory, presenting evidence that Johns had no motive and was in fact out of state when many of the poisonings occurred.
So the defense was grasping at straws, trying to shift the blame, but failing to present any compelling evidence.
Yeah, so in the end, the jury had to weigh the evidence presented, and on May 13, 1925, just 9 days after the trial began,
Wow.
Martha Wise was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison.
It's a somber outcome, but given the evidence and the gravity of the crimes, it's not surprising. But this isn't where Martha's story ends, is it?
This is where things take an unexpected twist. So you might assume that someone convicted of such heinous crimes would spend the rest of their life behind bars.
Right.
But that's not what happened in 1962 after serving 37 years of her sentence. Martha's sentence was commuted due to good behavior, and she was released from prison.
That's a surprising turn of events. What led to this commutation?
Well, from what we can gather from the sources, Martha was a model prisoner.
Okay.
She worked diligently in the prison laundry, avoided any conflicts or disciplinary issues over time. This consistent good behavior, coupled perhaps with the changing social and legal landscape of the time, seems to have influenced the decision to grant her clemency.
It raises those questions about the purpose of punishment. Is it solely about retribution, or is there room for rehabilitation and second chances?
Right, and in Martha's case, this second chance at freedom wouldn't exactly be a happy ending.
What happened when she was released?
Tragically, when Martha was released, her surviving family members wanted nothing to do with her. They refused to take her in.
Oh, wow.
Understandably, still harboring the pain and trauma caused by her actions decades earlier.
Of course, so she's granted freedom, but finds herself completely ostracized by the very people you would hope she'd want to reconnect with.
Right, imagine the weight of that rejection after decades of imprisonment.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
She tried living in a rest home, but that didn't work out either.
Oh, no.
It seems like she couldn't escape the shadow of her past, the whispers and the judgment that followed her.
It's a reminder of the lasting impact of these crimes, even after serving her time. True freedom remained elusive for Martha.
So it really underscores the idea that true freedom is more than just physical liberation.
Yeah.
It's about acceptance, belonging, having a support system, all of which Martha lacked.
It's true.
So what became of her? Did she try to rebuild her life elsewhere?
Yeah.
Well, this is where it gets really fascinating, facing this rejection and isolation. Martha made a surprising decision. She chose to return to prison.
Wait, she voluntarily went back to prison after finally being released?
It's almost unbelievable, right? But the sources suggest that the familiarity and the structure of prison life, despite its limitations, offered her a sense of stability and routine that she just couldn't find in the outside world.
Wow, that's a powerful statement about the psychological impact of her crimes and the profound sense of displacement she must have felt In a way, prison became her refuge, the only place where she felt any sense of belonging.
It's both tragic and thought-provoking.
Yeah,
It challenges our assumptions about freedom and punishment.
for sure.
In Martha's case, release from prison didn't equate to true freedom.
Right.
It's a reminder that the path to redemption can be long and arduous, often extending far beyond the confines of a prison cell.
It's true.
And Martha's story didn't just end with her return to prison. Her case continued to captivate public interest, becoming a subject of fascination and debate for decades to come.
You mentioned some interesting details about how her story was covered in the media.
Yeah, just a year after her conviction, she was featured in a Toledo Newsbee article series focusing on women who, as they put it, gambled against society and lost.
Interesting phrasing. It seems to frame these women's actions as deliberate choices with predictable consequences rather than exploring, the complex social and personal factors that might have contributed to their crimes.
Yeah, it's definitely a product of its time. And the nicknames they use for Martha, the Poison Widow of Hardscrabble and the Poison Fiend, paint a very sensationalized picture of her.
Those labels are so loaded, they reinforce the image of her as a villain, a monstrous figure rather than a complex human being with a troubled past.
And the fascination with her case didn't stop there. In 2008, almost a century after her crimes, her story was featured in an episode of the TV show Deadly Women.
It's a testament to the enduring power of true crime narratives. They offer us a glimpse into the dark side of human nature, the potential for violence and evil that exists within even the most seemingly ordinary individuals.
Martha's story has all the elements of a classic true crime tale. A seemingly normal person harboring dark secrets, a series of unexplained deaths, and a shocking confession that unravels a web of deceit.
But it's also a story that forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about the complexities of human behavior, the limits of forgiveness, and the long-lasting consequences of our actions.
Right. It's a story that stays with you, that makes you wonder what really drove Martha Wise to commit such horrific acts. Was it solely her desire to attend funerals, as she claimed? Or was there something more, a deeper psychological turmoil that fueled her actions?
That's the question that continues to intrigue and perplex those who study her case, and it's a question that deserves further exploration. I mean, we've looked at the events of her life, the trial, her imprisonment, and her eventual release, but what can we glean from the limited information we have about her psychological state? Was she truly insane, as her defense team argued, or was there another explanation for her actions?
That's what I'm eager to unpack.
Uh,
Let's dive into the psychological aspects of this case and see what insights we can gain. It feels like we're trying to solve a puzzle, but we're missing some pieces when it comes to Martha's psychological state.
Yeah, we don't have those in-depth psychological evaluations from that time.
Yeah.
So we have to try to piece together her motivations and mental state based on what she said and the social context of her life.
Right.
It's a challenge, but it's fascinating.
Yeah. So where do we even begin? Like, what clues can we find in her story that might help us understand her a little bit better?
Well, one thing that really jumps out is that just the huge amount of hardship she had to endure throughout her life. Backbreaking labor on a farm, potentially unhappy marriage, the loss of her first child.
Yeah,
I mean, these are all significant stressors
Yeah.
that can really affect someone's mental and emotional well-being. It's like a pressure cooker. And each hardship just adds another layer of pressure. And then her husband's death, the disapproval of her relationship with Walter Johns. It's almost like those events pushed her over the edge.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. And it's important to consider the social context, too. In the 1920s, women had very limited options and faced immense pressure to conform to certain roles.
Right.
A widow with 4 children seeking a relationship outside of marriage would have been scandalous,
Yeah.
even ostracized.
Right.
This pressure combined with her existing struggles could have created like a perfect storm.
Right. And then there's that unsettling fascination with funerals, even from a young age.
Right. That's a key piece of the puzzle. It suggests a distorted relationship with death and grief.
Yeah.
Some might speculate about conditions like necrophilia, but without more information, it's really irresponsible to make those kinds of diagnoses.
Right.
What we can say is that her intense focus on these death rituals and her desire to create these rituals, it points to something deep, a deep psychological disturbance. Yeah, it's almost like she found a sense of control in the face of death, like a way to create order out of the chaos of her life.
That's a really insightful observation. By orchestrating these tragedies, she became the center of attention. She was the one controlling the narrative.
Right.
It's a twisted form of empowerment, maybe, in a life where she felt powerless.
And it makes that claim that she simply wanted to attend more funerals, even more unsettling. Was that a genuine motivation, or was it a way to deflect attention from something darker, a more sinister motive?
That's the million-dollar question, and we may never know for sure, but, it's important to remember that human motivation is rarely simple. There are often multiple layers, conscious and unconscious, that drive our actions.
So where does that leave us? Can we
Mhm.
definitively say whether Martha Wise was insane, as her defense team argued?
Based on what we have, it's really impossible to say for sure. The level of planning and premeditation in her poisonings suggests a degree of control,
Yeah.
that contradicts a claim of insanity. However, her bizarre justification for the murders and her obsession with funerals definitely points to a troubled mind.
It's fascinating. It's like this paradox. She was clearly capable of planning and executing these crimes, yet her motivation seems so irrational, so disconnected from reality.
Yeah, it's a reminder that the human psyche is complex and often contradictory. There can be a fine line between sanity and madness, and sometimes those lines blur.
So what can we, the listeners, take away from this deep dive into the chilling case of Martha Wise?
Hmm.
What does it tell us about human nature and the potential for darkness within us all?
I think it reminds us that even in the face of these horrific acts, it's so crucial to seek understanding rather than just, simply resorting to judgment.
Right.
Martha Wise's story is a tragedy on multiple levels for the victims, for her family, and for
All
herself.
right.
It really underscores the devastating consequences of unaddressed trauma, the complexities of mental illness, and the societal pressures that can contribute to this descent into darkness.
It's a sobering reminder that darkness can really lurk beneath the surface of even the most seemingly ordinary individuals, and it challenges us to be more aware, more compassionate, and more willing to seek help for ourselves and others when those warning signs appear.
It also encourages us to, question those assumptions we have about good and evil, sanity and madness. Martha Wise's story is a stark reminder that the human psyche is vast and often uncharted territory, capable of both great love and unimaginable cruelty.
And while we may never fully understand what drove her to commit these terrible acts, her case serves as a powerful reminder that the truth is often stranger than fiction.
Definitely.
It's a story that stays with you long after you've heard it, prompting reflection and a deeper understanding of just the complexities of the human experience.
Absolutely. And if you found this deep dive compelling, I really encourage you to do your own research, explore the historical accounts, delve deeper into the psychology of criminal behavior, and consider those social and cultural factors that shaped Martha Wise's life and choices. There's always more to learn, more to ponder, and more to discuss about the Poison Widow of Hardscrabble.
Exactly. And remember, sometimes the most compelling stories are the ones that leave us with more questions than answers. They challenge us to think critically, to empathize with the complexities of human experience, and to acknowledge that darkness can exist even in the most unexpected places.